He thought it was just another video for views. But when he shouted, "Get out of the spot, old man," that everything spiraled out of control. The old man didn't fight back, but someone far worse heard him. And when the Hell's Angels showed up. Hey there, before we start, hit the like button, tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the story that's about to begin. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Bill Thompson's modest trailer on the outskirts of Sturgis, South Dakota. At 78, his movements had slowed, but the disciplined routine remained, a habit forged through decades of military service. He carefully pinned his old Marine Corps medal to the inside of his jacket lapel, where only he could see it. The medal wasn't for display. It was a reminder of promises made long ago. Bill's weathered hands gripped his intricately carved wooden cane, a gift from the Lakota tribe he had once helped during a devastating flood. The cane wasn't just a walking aid. It told stories through its carvings, stories of honor, sacrifice, and quiet heroism that few would ever hear. Another day, he mumbled to the framed photo of Elizabeth, his late wife, "Just getting through another day, Lizzie." The Veterans Memorial Park was his destination that morning. He had volunteered to help with preparations for the upcoming remembrance ceremony, despite his daughter Karen's protests about him driving alone. His blue disabled parking permit hung from the rearview mirror of his aging Ford pickup, not a luxury, but a necessity for a man whose knee had been shattered during service. As Bill drove through downtown Sturgis, he couldn't help but notice how the quiet mountain town had changed. Once known primarily for its annual motorcycle rally that drew the Hell's Angels and other clubs from across the country, Sturgis had lately become a magnet for a different kind of visitor. Young social media personalities, attracted by the rugged aesthetics and outlaw mythology of the area. At the same time, across town, in a luxury rental cabin, Tyler Brooks was planning his day with methodical precision. At 23, Tyler had already amassed over 5 million followers across various platforms. His brand was built on a foundation of provocative pranks and what he called reality checks for the entitled. His fans loved the adrenaline rush of watching others' discomfort, and Tyler loved the revenue stream. "So what's the content plan today?" asked Jason, Tyler's childhood friend turned cameraman, sprawled across a leather couch. Tyler adjusted the expensive camera equipment with the focus of a surgeon. "I'm thinking we do the Stolen Valor series. Always gets massive engagement. Find some old dude wearing military stuff and call him out. People eat that shit up." Cody, the third member of their content creation team, looked up from his phone. "But what if they're actual veterans? Last time, that guy turned out to be legit, and we got serious hate." Tyler waved dismissively. "That's why we'll be strategic. Pick someone who looks weak, confused. If they're legit, we can always edit it out. No one's gonna fact-check us, and controversy is just more traffic anyway." Jason nodded, already anticipating the viewer metrics. "The algorithm loves conflict. We need something dramatic today if we want to beat last week's numbers." Tyler's phone buzzed with a notification. His latest video, confronting a waitress about a supposed incorrect order until she cried, had just crossed 2 million views. The comments were a mixture of outrage and adoration, both serving his purpose equally well. "See, people pretend to hate it, but they can't look away." Tyler smirked. "Now let's head out. I want to scout the Veterans Park. There's bound to be some old-timers there we can use." None of them noticed the weathered Hell's Angels patch on the jacket of the man sitting quietly at the bar across the room, nursing a coffee while listening to every word. Jack Harlow had ridden with the Hells Angels for over 40 years. At 65, his face carried the map of every road he'd traveled, every fight he'd survived. The club had evolved over the decades, walking the line between its outlaw roots and its newer community presence. Jack had overseen much of that transformation for the Sturgis chapter. When the young content creators left, Jack pulled out his phone and sent a brief text to the club's group chat. "Keep eyes on the Memorial Park today. Potential situation." The responses came immediately. Simple thumbs-up emojis from men who understood that Jack's warnings were never without cause. Jack paid his bill and walked outside to his meticulously maintained Harley. The Hells Angels might have softened some of their tactics over the years, but their core principles remained unchanged. Respect was non-negotiable, and loyalty to their own was absolute. And Bill Thompson, whether he still claimed membership or not, would always be one of their own. At the Veterans Memorial Park, Bill carefully maneuvered his truck into a disabled parking space. The morning had warmed considerably, and he could feel a sweat beating on his forehead as he reached for his cane. The small park, with its modest monuments and American flags, had become his sanctuary in recent years. Several other volunteers were already setting up chairs for the weekend ceremony. Bill nodded respectfully to Frank Delgado, another Vietnam veteran who had lost an arm in combat. "Thought your daughter was driving you these days," Frank called out. Bill smiled. "What she doesn't know won't hurt her. Besides, it's just across town." As Bill began arranging programs on a small table, he noticed a sleek SUV pull into the parking lot. 3 young men emerged, carrying expensive camera equipment. Something about their purposeful stride and the way they scanned the area sent a chill through his spine, a sensation he hadn't felt since his combat days. "Excuse me, sir." The tallest one approached, camera already recording. "I'm Tyler Brooks. You might know me from Tyler Takes Down, 10 million followers across platforms." Bill looked at him blankly. "Can't say that I do, son. Are you here for the veterans ceremony?" Tyler exchanged a quick glance with his friends, and Bill caught the smirk that passed between them. He'd seen that look before. Predators identifying prey. "That's a nice medal you've got there." Tyler pointed to a slight bulge in Bill's jacket. "Mind if I ask what it's for?" Bill's hand instinctively covered his jacket. "It's personal, not for show." "See, that's interesting," Tyler continued, his voice shifting to a louder performance tone. "Because I'm something of an expert on military decorations, and I've been doing this series about people who pretend to be veterans for attention or benefits." Bill's weathered face remained impassive, but his grip tightened on his cane. "Young man, I've been standing in the sun too long already. If you'll excuse me." "Just show us the medal," Tyler persisted, stepping closer, blocking Bill's path. "If you earned it, you should be proud to display it, right? Unless there's something to hide." Frank Delgado had noticed the confrontation and began moving toward them, but he was across the park and moving slowly. "I don't have anything to prove to you," Bill said quietly, his dignity intact despite the growing discomfort. "Now please, step aside." Tyler's smile hardened. "See, that's exactly what the fakes say. Real heroes don't mind verification. Let me guess, bought that medal online? Or maybe found it at a pawn shop?" Jason moved the camera closer to Bill's face, while Cody positioned himself to capture the interaction from another angle. "This is going viral for sure," Cody whispered, just loud enough for Bill to hear. Bill's heart raced, but decades of discipline kept his expression neutral. These boys were looking for a reaction, any reaction, and he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. What none of them realized was that the confrontation had already drawn attention. At Rusty's Bar and Grill across the street, the afternoon gathering of the Sturgis chapter of the Hells Angels had just begun. Through the large front window, several members had a clear view of the memorial park. Jack Harlow was mid-sentence in a discussion about the upcoming rally when he noticed the scene unfolding. He recognized Bill immediately, not just as a fellow veteran, but as the man who had once been his commanding officer in operations too classified to ever discuss openly. "Hold that thought," Jack said, rising from his seat. The other angels turned to look out the window, their expressions darkening as they observed the young men surrounding the elderly veteran. "That's Bill Thompson," said Mike Diesel Reynolds, a mountain of a man with arms covered in faded tattoos. "Thought he moved away years ago." "Came back after his wife passed," Jack replied. "Keeps to himself, mostly." Diesel nodded toward the scene outside. "Those kids are filming him. Doesn't look friendly." "No, it doesn't," Jack agreed, watching as Tyler moved aggressively closer to Bill, who was now backed against his truck. "Think I'll go say hello to my old friend." The 15 Hells Angels in the bar didn't need further explanation. As Jack headed for the door, they followed without question, a silent, leather-clad formation, moving with surprising discipline. Back at the parking lot, the confrontation had escalated. Tyler had positioned himself deliberately between Bill and his truck door, while his friends continued filming from multiple angles. "Just admit it, old man," Tyler was saying, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Stolen valor is a serious offense. If you're faking military service, our viewers deserve to know." Bill had remained stoic throughout the harassment, but his legs were starting to tremble with the strain of standing too long. When he tried to lean more heavily on his cane, Tyler reached out and pushed it slightly. Not enough to make him fall, but enough to unbalance him momentarily. "Whoa, careful there," Tyler said with exaggerated concern, perfectly playing to the cameras. "Maybe if you'd actually served, you'd have better balance." The comment stung more than Bill wanted to admit. The injuries that necessitated his cane had been sustained during a classified extraction mission in territory he still wasn't permitted to name. "That's enough," Bill finally said, his voice quiet but firm. "You've had your fun. Now let me get in my truck and leave." "Or what?" Tyler leaned in closer, sensing weakness. "Going to call for backup? Your imaginary unit?" The rumble started as a distant thunder, but quickly grew louder. 15 Harley-Davidsons rolled into the parking lot in perfect formation, surrounding the small group by the disabled parking space. The angels dismounted in unison, removing their helmets but keeping their formation intact. Tyler's face drained of color as he realized he was suddenly surrounded by a wall of leather-clad bikers. His camera, still recording, captured his expression shifting from arrogant confidence to uncertain fear. Jack Harlow stepped forward, his weathered face impassive as he surveyed the scene. His eyes met Bill's, and decades of shared history passed between them in that silent exchange. "Everything all right here, Captain?" Jack asked, using Bill's former rank with deliberate respect. Bill straightened his posture slightly, old habits emerging in the presence of a former subordinate. "Just a misunderstanding, Sergeant Harlow." Tyler's eyes widened at the exchange of military titles. His confident smirk faltered as he looked between the elderly man he'd been harassing and the imposing biker who had addressed him with clear deference. Jack turned his attention to Tyler, his voice deceptively casual. "Interesting project you've got going. Care to explain it to me?" Tyler swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how the situation had changed. The cameras were still rolling, but the narrative had shifted beyond his control. The content he'd planned to capture, an elderly man's humiliation, was transforming into something entirely different. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that this, whatever it was about to become, might be the most authentic moment he'd ever filmed. As the standoff continued, Frank Delgado finally reached them, his one arm holding his veteran's cap over, his heart in a gesture of respect toward Bill. The silent memorial park had become the stage for an unexpected confrontation, not between the young and the old as Tyler had planned, but between empty values and enduring principles. And as more bikers continued to arrive, drawn by cryptic text messages from their brothers, the air filled with tension and the promise of consequences, the real story was just beginning to unfold, and no one, especially not Tyler Brooks, could predict how it would end. From an upstairs window of the small cafe overlooking the park, Emma Wilson, a freelance journalist who had come to Sturgis to write about the changing culture of motorcycle towns, watched the scene unfolding with professional interest. She raised her camera and started documenting what promised to be much more than a local interest story. Some miles away, Sarah Brooks was reviewing her son's latest viral video with a mixture of shame and resignation, unaware that Tyler was currently filming what would become the most consequential content of his career, though not in the way he had intended. In the growing silence of the standoff, with cameras still rolling, Jack Harlow looked directly into Tyler's lens and spoke the words that would soon echo across the internet. "Respect isn't content, boy, and some lessons cost more than views." The tension in the Veterans Memorial Park parking lot was palpable. Tyler Brooks, self-proclaimed internet sensation, found himself surrounded by Hell's Angels, not the carefully curated confrontation he had planned, but something far more authentic and terrifying. "I asked you a question, son," Jack Harlow repeated, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who rarely needed to raise it to be heard. "What exactly are you filming here?" Tyler's mind raced, calculating angles and narratives even in his panic. Could this be spun into a different kind of viral content? Being threatened by bikers might generate even more views than harassing an old man. "We're just creating content about veterans," Tyler managed, finding his voice. "Social experiment, really. Testing people's reactions." Jack's weathered face remained expressionless, but his eyes, hard as flint, never left Tyler's. A social experiment. Interesting choice of words for harassment. Behind Tyler, Jason was still filming, though his hands had begun to tremble slightly. Cody had taken several steps back, distancing himself from what was clearly becoming a dangerous situation. "We weren't harassing anyone," Tyler protested, his voice pitched perfectly for victimhood. "Free country. First Amendment. We're just asking questions." A low rumble of disapproval moved through the gathered bikers. Diesel, the mountain of a man standing just behind Jack, cracked his knuckles, not as a threat, but as a man struggling to contain his growing anger. Bill Thompson, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, suddenly stepped forward. Despite his age and the slight tremor in his hands, there was something unmistakably commanding in his bearing. "That's enough, Jack," he said quietly. "These boys aren't worth the trouble." Jack didn't take his eyes off Tyler. "With all due respect, Captain, Some lessons need teaching. Not by us, Bill replied. Not today. The exchange seemed to confuse Tyler, who looked between the elderly man and the biker with growing uncertainty. The power dynamic he had so confidently assessed earlier was clearly more complex than he had imagined. "Look," Tyler said, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Obviously, there's been a misunderstanding. We thought—" "You thought an old man with a cane was an easy target," Jack interrupted. "You thought wrong." From across the parking lot, Frank Delgado had been joined by 3 more veterans who had arrived for the ceremony preparations. They stood at a distance, watching but not interfering. This was Hell's Angels business now, and in Sturgis, those boundaries were respected. "We don't want any trouble," Jason said, finally lowering his camera. Jack's smile was cold. "Should have thought about that before you started it." Bill placed a steady hand on Jack's leather-clad shoulder. "Let them go, Sergeant. But first," he turned to Tyler, "I believe you owe me an apology." Tyler hesitated. In his 5 years of creating increasingly provocative content, he had never apologized. Not when his pranks had caused property damage. Not when his challenges had left people in tears. Apologies were admissions of wrongdoing, and wrongdoing was bad for the brand. "I'm sorry if you felt offended," he offered, using the classic non-apology that had served him well in previous controversies. Jack took a step forward, but Bill's hand tightened on his shoulder. "Not good enough," Bill said simply. "A real apology, from a man who acknowledges his mistakes." Emma Wilson, who had made her way down from the cafe and was now observing from the edge of the parking lot, raised her professional camera and continued documenting the standoff. 20 years in journalism had taught her to recognize pivotal moments, and this confrontation between generations and value systems promised to be exactly that. Tyler looked around, assessing his options. The bikers had effectively surrounded them, though they maintained enough distance that no one could claim they were physically threatening the young men. His usual tactics, escalation, deflection, victimhood, seemed suddenly inadequate. For perhaps the first time since he had begun his social media career, Tyler Brooks was confronted with a situation he couldn't control through editing, framing, or manipulation. These men, with their weathered faces and unwavering stares, operated by a different code, one that predated viral videos and engagement metrics. "I'm sorry," he finally said, the words unfamiliar in his mouth. "I shouldn't have bothered you." Bill nodded once, accepting the apology without further comment. Jack, however, wasn't satisfied. "The cameras," he said, pointing to the equipment still in Jason's hands. "Delete the footage." Tyler's eyes widened. "We can't do that. That's our livelihood." "Harassing veterans is your livelihood?" Diesel asked, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "It's not like that," Tyler protested. "We're content creators. This is how we make a living." Jack looked at him with something approaching pity. "If that's how you make a living, boy, you might want to reconsider your choices." Emma, who had been quietly documenting the exchange, chose this moment to step forward. "Excuse me," she called out, her journalist's instinct for timing impeccable. "Emma Wilson, freelance journalist. Would anyone care to comment on what's happening here?" All eyes turned to the newcomer. Emma, with her professional camera and recorder, represented something both the young content creators and the bikers understood: the power of narrative and how quickly it could shift. "Nothing happening here," Jack responded. Just a friendly conversation between generations. Emma directed her attention to Bill. Sir, these young men were filming you without consent. Are you pressing charges? Before Bill could answer, Tyler interjected. No one's pressing charges. This was a misunderstanding, that's all. Funny, Emma replied, her tone professional but with an edge. I have about 10 minutes of footage suggesting otherwise. Harassment of an elderly veteran seems newsworthy to me. The color drained from Tyler's face. Amateur footage on social media was one thing. Professionally documented evidence in mainstream media was quite another. His sponsorship deals had morality clauses. Look, Tyler said, addressing Bill directly now, genuine desperation in his voice. I apologized. What else do you want? Bill studied the young man for a long moment. Despite his age, his gaze was sharp, assessing. I want you to learn something today, he finally said. Something about respect, about consequences. Jack nodded in approval. The rest of the Hells Angels maintained their positions, a wall of leather and discipline. Delete the footage you took of me without permission, Bill continued. And then I want you to spend some time talking to actual veterans. Not for your videos, not for content, but to learn. Tyler hesitated, caught between defiance and self-preservation. And if I refuse? Then the lady journalist here publishes her story, Jack said simply. With all the footage she's captured, I imagine your sponsors might have some questions. It was checkmate, and Tyler knew it. With reluctant movements, he motioned for Jason to delete the footage, which his friend did with visible relief. Emma lowered her camera slightly. I'd still like to understand what was happening here. For context. Bill looked at her thoughtfully. Young people sometimes mistake age for weakness. It's an old story. And the Hells Angels' involvement. Emma pressed, professional curiosity overriding caution. Jack stepped forward. Veterans look out for each other. Some of us just wear different uniforms now. Emma nodded, making mental notes. The story was evolving before her eyes. Not just about an altercation in a parking lot, but about community, respect, and the unwritten codes that still governed places like Sturgis. I'd like to interview both of you, she said. Properly, on the record. Bill shook his head. Not interested in publicity. I understand, Emma replied, then handed him her card. But if you change your mind, my focus is on veterans' experiences and community support systems, not sensationalism. Bill took the card with a polite nod, but made no promises. Tyler, seeing an opportunity to salvage something from the situation, attempted to redirect. I could talk about my perspective, about how this has been a learning experience. The look Jack gave him would have withered stronger men. Boy, you haven't even begun to learn yet. As the confrontation seemed to be winding down, a new vehicle pulled into the parking lot. A police cruiser with the Sturgis Police Department insignia on its side. Chief Robert Martinez, a 20-year veteran of the force, stepped out and surveyed the scene with practiced eyes. Everything all right here? He asked, though his relaxed posture suggested he already had a good idea of the situation. Just a misunderstanding, Chief, Jack responded. Nothing to worry about. Chief Martinez nodded at several of the Hells Angels by name before turning his attention to Bill. Captain Thompson, good to see you again, sir. Bill nodded in acknowledgement. Robert, how's your father? Doing well, thanks to that VA appeal you helped him with, the chief replied. Then, noticing the three young men with their camera equipment, his expression hardened slightly. These boys causing trouble? Nothing we couldn't handle, Bill assured him. Tyler, already uncomfortable with how many connections seemed to exist in this small town, shifted nervously under the chief's scrutiny. "We were just leaving," he said quickly. "Right, guys?" Jason and Cody nodded emphatically, already backing toward their SUV. Chief Martinez made no move to stop them, but fixed Tyler with a steady gaze. "Sturgis is a special kind of place, son. We remember how to respect our elders here, especially those who served." Tyler nodded, eager now to escape the situation entirely. "Yes, sir. Understood." As the three young men retreated to their vehicle, Emma approached the chief. "Any comment on the Hells Angels' role in the community, Chief Martinez, specifically their relationship with veterans?" The chief gave her a measured look. "The club has a complicated history, Ms. Wilson, Emma Wilson. Ms. Wilson. But one thing that's never been complicated is their respect for those who served. In Sturgis, that matters." As Tyler's SUV pulled out of the parking lot, Jack turned to Bill with a grin that took years off his weathered face. "Just like old times, eh, Captain?" Bill shook his head, but there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Not quite, Sergeant. We're a bit slower on the extraction these days." The gathered angels laughed, the tension of the confrontation dissipating. Chief Martinez tipped his hat to Bill before returning to his cruiser, apparently satisfied that order had been restored. As the bikers began to disperse, Emma approached Bill once more. "Those young men, will they actually learn anything from this, do you think?" Bill leaned heavily on his cane, suddenly looking every one of his 78 years. "Hard to say. Some lessons take time to sink in." "And some never do," Jack added, his momentary lightness fading back to seriousness. Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I'd still like to tell this story. Not the confrontation, but the why of it. The connections between veterans, the Hells Angels, this community." Bill considered her words. "You seem sincere, but I've seen too many stories twisted for shock value." "I understand your hesitation," Emma replied, "but important stories deserve careful telling." After a moment of consideration, Bill nodded toward the small cafe across the street. "I could use some coffee. If you want to talk, off the record for now. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Emma smiled, recognizing the olive branch. "I'll be there, and thank you." As Bill made his way slowly back to his truck, Jack fell into step beside him. "You sure about talking to a reporter? Thought you preferred staying under the radar these days." "Maybe it's time for some stories to be told," Bill replied. "The right way, by the right people." Jack studied his old friend and commanding officer. "This isn't just about those kids, is it?" Bill's eyes, still sharp despite the years, met Jack's. "When Elizabeth died, I thought that was it. End of my story. But today reminded me there are still things worth fighting for, still lessons worth teaching." Jack nodded in understanding. "The club will stand with you, whatever you decide." "I know," Bill said simply. Then, with a glimmer of his old authority, he added, "Now go get those boys in line." I saw how Diesel was flexing. Would have been a mess if he'd lost his temper. Jack grinned. "Some things never change, Captain. Still giving orders. Only when necessary, Sergeant. Only when necessary." As Bill drove carefully to the cafe, his mind traveled back through decades of service, sacrifice, and the brotherhood that had sustained him through it all. Perhaps it was time to share some of those stories, not for glory or recognition, but as a reminder of what respect truly meant in a world increasingly driven by clicks and views. Meanwhile, in their rental cabin, Tyler and his friends were having a heated argument about how to salvage their content plans for the day. None of them had yet realized that Emma Wilson's camera had captured far more than just a confrontation. It had documented a pivotal moment that would soon force them to confront truths about themselves they had long avoided. And in the coming days, the ripple effects of that parking lot standoff would spread far beyond Sturgis, challenging assumptions about youth and age, respect and entitlement, real valor and empty performance. The story was just beginning, and like all true stories, its ending remained unwritten. Tyler Brooks slouched on the leather couch of the rental cabin, staring at his phone with growing disbelief. The post was everywhere. Emma Wilson's initial article about the confrontation at Veterans Memorial Park had gone viral overnight, accompanied by select images from her documentation of the event. The headline alone made his stomach churn. Content creators confront elderly veteran, meet Hell's Angels' wall of respect. "We're screwed," Jason muttered, scrolling through his own feed. Absolutely screwed. Cody, who had remained largely silent since they'd returned from the park, looked up from his laptop. "It's worse than you think. Bright Boost Energy Drink just emailed. They're reevaluating our partnership in light of recent events." Tyler threw his phone across the room, where it bounced harmlessly off a cushioned chair. One stupid old man and a bunch of ancient bikers. Do they have any idea what this could cost us? About 80,000 in canceled sponsorships so far, Cody replied dryly, and counting. The reality of their situation was sinking in. For years, Tyler's controversial content had walked the line of acceptability, generating outrage that translated directly to engagement and profits. But this time, something was different. The narrative had escaped his control entirely. "We need to respond," Tyler decided, pacing the room. "Release our own statement. Spin this." "How?" Jason asked. "We deleted the footage, remember? We've got nothing to counter her story with." "We don't need footage. We just need a narrative." Tyler's mind was already racing, calculating angles. "We say we were conducting a social experiment about respect for veterans. That we were going to reveal at the end that we were donating to veterans' causes." Cody shook his head. "Nobody's going to believe that. Especially not after all your other pranks. Videos. Then we apologize. Full damage control." Tyler grabbed his laptop. "Teary video. Talk about how this was a wake-up call. How we're going to change our content direction." "Will we?" Jason asked quietly. Tyler looked at him sharply. "What? Will we actually change? Or is this just more performance?" There was something different in Jason's tone, a weariness that hadn't been there before. Before Tyler could answer, his phone rang from across the room. Cody retrieved it and checked the screen. "It's your mom." Tyler groaned but took the phone. "Hey, Mom, kinda busy right now." "Tyler James Brooks." His mother's voice was ice cold. "I just had Mrs. Henderson from church call me about an article she saw. Something about my son harassing a veteran." Tyler winced. "Mom, it's not what it looks like. The media is twisting." "Don't you dare lie to me." Sarah Brooks cut him off. "I raised you better than this." The disappointment in her voice hit harder than any angry comment online. Sarah Brooks was a nurse at the VA hospital in Minneapolis, her entire career dedicated to caring for veterans. Tyler had grown up hearing stories about the sacrifices of the men and women she treated. "I'm sorry," Tyler said automatically, the words still feeling strange in his mouth. "I'm not the one you should be apologizing to," his mother replied. "Do you have any idea who that man might have been? What he might have sacrificed while you were busy building a career out of other people's humiliation?" Tyler remained silent, unaccustomed to being on the receiving end of such direct criticism. Your father would have been ashamed, Sarah added quietly. The mention of his father, Staff Sergeant James Brooks, killed in action when Tyler was just 7, sent a jolt through him. It was a low blow, one his mother rarely used. That's not fair, Tyler protested weakly. Neither is what you did to that elderly veteran, Sarah responded. Fix this, Tyler. Not with one of your fake apology videos. Actually, fix it. She hung up without waiting for a response. Tyler stared at his phone, his mother's words echoing in his mind. Behind the carefully cultivated image of the fearless content creator, there remained the son of a fallen soldier, a connection to service and sacrifice he had buried beneath years of increasingly provocative videos. "You okay?" Jason asked, noticing his friend's unusual silence. Tyler nodded mechanically. "Fine, let's just figure this out tomorrow. I need to think." Across town, Emma Wilson sat in her hotel room, reviewing the footage she had captured at the memorial park. The confrontation itself was compelling, but what really interested her professionally were the interactions afterward. The clear bonds between the veterans and the Hells Angels, the community connections exemplified by the police chief's familiarity with all parties involved. Her initial article had focused on the confrontation, but the coffee conversation with Bill Thompson had revealed something much deeper. For over 2 hours, Bill had shared stories of his service, his connections to the Sturgis chapter of the Hells Angels, and the complex support systems that existed beneath the surface of the small South Dakota town. "This isn't just about a viral moment," Emma murmured to herself as she made notes. "This is about how communities protect their own, how respect functions as currency in places mainstream America has forgotten." Her phone buzzed with a text from her editor in Chicago. "Wilson, stories blowing up. Need follow-up ASAP. Angle on influencer culture versus traditional values." Emma frowned slightly. The narrative was already being simplified, reduced to a clickbait battle between generations. The truth, as Bill had shared it with her, was far more nuanced. She typed back, "Working on deeper story. Connections between veterans and outlaw clubs. Community protection mechanisms. Give me 48 hours. The response came quickly. "Fine, but need influencer reaction too. Viewers want both sides." Emma sighed. The media ecosystem demanded balance, even when the situation wasn't balanced at all. Still, her journalistic training reminded her that all perspectives deserved consideration. "I'll see what I can do," she texted back. Setting her phone aside, Emma returned to her notes from the conversation with Bill. One detail in particular had caught her attention, his mention of how Jack Harlow had once served under his command in operations that still don't officially exist in any record. The connection between the elderly veteran and the Hells Angels president wasn't just about shared military service. It was about shared secrets, shared burdens that civilians would never fully understand. That was the real story here, not just a clash between generations, but between those who understood the weight of service and those who treated life as a performance for clicks. Meanwhile, at the Hells Angels clubhouse on the outskirts of town, Jack Harlow addressed the gathered members. The large common room, decorated with military memorabilia alongside motorcycle paraphernalia, was filled to capacity. "Brothers," Jack began, his voice commanding immediate attention. "By now you've all seen the news about what happened at the memorial park. I want to be clear about our position moving forward." Diesel, standing near the back, called out, "Those punks got off easy, if you ask me." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Jack held up a hand for silence. "Captain Thompson has asked that we let this matter rest. We will respect his wishes. But Diesel began to protest. "We will respect his wishes," Jack repeated firmly, "but we will also remain vigilant. The rally starts in 3 weeks. More outsiders will be pouring into town. Some will understand our ways. Others won't." The annual Sturgis Motorcycle Rally transformed the small town of 7,000 residents into a temporary home for over 500,000 bikers and tourists. For the Hells Angels, it was both a celebration of brotherhood and a logistical challenge. The media's already painting this as some kind of generational warfare. Jack continued, "Old school versus new school. That's not what this is about." "What is it about, then?" asked a younger member near the front. Jack's weathered face grew serious. "It's about respect, something that doesn't change with the times." After the meeting concluded, Jack found himself alone in his small office, staring at an old photograph on the wall. It showed a much younger version of himself alongside Bill Thompson and 3 other men, all in unmarked military fatigues, standing in front of a helicopter in a landscape that could have been anywhere in Southeast Asia. His phone buzzed with a text from Bill. "Reporter wants to talk to you. Your call." Jack considered the request. The Hells Angels had a long-standing policy of avoiding the media, but Emma Wilson's initial article had been surprisingly fair, and perhaps Bill was right. Maybe some stories needed to be told. He texted back, "Send her my number." The next morning, Tyler woke to more bad news. 2 more sponsors had pulled out, and a major platform was reviewing his channel for policy violations. But worse than the professional consequences was the growing personal discomfort, something he hadn't experienced in years. His phone contained dozens of messages from his mother, each one a photograph, pictures of his father in uniform, pictures of Tyler as a child at military ceremonies, pictures of the veterans his mother had cared for over the years. No words accompanied the images. None were needed. "Guys, wake up," Tyler called to his friends, who were sleeping on couches in the main room. "I need to go somewhere." Jason rubbed his eyes groggily. "Where? It's not even 8. "Veterans Affairs office." "The one downtown." Cody sat up, confused. "Why? We making some kind of apology video there?" "No cameras," Tyler said firmly. "I just need to go there." His friends exchanged puzzled glances, but knew better than to argue when Tyler used that tone. The Sturgis Veterans Affairs satellite office was a modest building near the city center. As Tyler approached the entrance, he felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He hadn't set foot in a VA facility since his father's funeral. Inside, a middle-aged receptionist looked up with a professional smile that faltered slightly when she recognized him. "Can I help you?" Tyler cleared his throat. "I was hoping to speak with someone about volunteer opportunities." The receptionist's surprise was evident. "Volunteer opportunities?" "Yes, or donations, or whatever might be needed." The words felt strange, unscripted, but somehow right. "You can speak with our coordinator, Mrs. Jennings. She's with someone right now, but if you'd like to wait." Tyler nodded and took a seat in the waiting area, ignoring the curious glances from other visitors. On the wall across from him hung photographs of local veterans, faces spanning decades of American conflicts, from World War II to Afghanistan. He found himself studying them, really looking at the men and women who had served in a way he never had before. "Mr. Brooks?" Tyler looked up to see an older woman standing in a doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Jennings, thank you for seeing me." She gestured for him to follow her into a small office. "I must admit I'm surprised to see you here, especially after yesterday's events." Tyler winced. News travels fast in Sturgis. It's a small town with a long memory," Mrs. Jennings replied, taking a seat behind her desk. "Now, you mentioned volunteering. Yes, I want to. I need to make amends." Mrs. Jennings studied him thoughtfully. "Amends are earned, Mr. Brooks, not declared." "I understand that," Tyler said, surprised to find that he actually meant it. "I'm willing to put in the work, whatever that looks like." "Why the sudden change of heart?" Her question was direct, unapologetic. Tyler considered deflecting, crafting the kind of compelling narrative that had built his online persona. But something about this small office, with its faded photographs and filing cabinets, demanded authenticity. "My father was Staff Sergeant James Brooks. He died in Iraq when I was 7. Tyler swallowed hard, the words difficult to form. "For a long time, I think I've been angry about that. Angry at a system that took him away. Angry at the respect he gave to something that gave nothing back." Mrs. Jennings's expression softened slightly. "And now?" "Now I'm starting to wonder if I've been dishonoring his memory instead of protecting it." The admission hurt more than Tyler had expected. Mrs. Jennings opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "As it happens, we do have a program that might be appropriate. We've been trying to bridge the gap between younger generations and our aging veteran population. Digital storytelling, oral history recording." "You want me to film veterans?" Tyler asked, confused. "After what just happened? Not for entertainment or content, as you call it," Mrs. Jennings clarified. "For preservation, for education. These stories disappear when they're not recorded, including your father's." The implication wasn't lost on Tyler. How much of his own father's story had he ignored in his quest for viral fame? "I'd like to try," he said finally, "if you'll give me the chance." Mrs. Jennings handed him a form. "Report here Monday morning at 9 a.m. You'll be paired with a mentor, and you'll follow their lead. No cameras unless specifically approved. No social media posts about this work." The restrictions would have seemed intolerable just days ago. Now they felt like a lifeline, a structure to follow when his own moral compass seemed so suddenly unreliable. "Thank you," Tyler said, taking the form. "I won't let you down." "That remains to be seen, Mr. Brooks." Mrs. Jennings stood, indicating the meeting was over. "One more thing. I believe you owe someone a genuine apology before Monday." Tyler nodded, knowing exactly who she meant. "Yes, ma'am, I do." As Tyler left the VA office, he checked his phone to find multiple missed calls from his agent and manager. The professional consequences of the Memorial Park incident were still unfolding, but somehow they seemed less important now. Something fundamental had shifted, a recalibration of priorities that had begun with his mother's phone call and continued in that small office. Across town, Emma Wilson was sitting down to coffee with Jack Harlow at a small diner on the outskirts of Sturgis. The Hells Angels president had arrived alone, his leather cut, bearing the infamous Death's head patch that had inspired fear and fascination for decades. "Thank you for meeting with me," Emma began. "I know the club typically avoids media attention." Jack nodded. "For good reason. Most stories about us are written before the first question is even asked." "I'm interested in the real story," Emma assured him. "The connections between the club and the veteran community here. The support systems that operate beneath the surface." Jack studied her thoughtfully. "Bill Thompson vouched for you. That carries weight." "I understand that trust is earned," Emma said. "I'm willing to earn it." "All right," Jack decided. "What do you want to know?" "Let's start with yesterday. That wasn't just about defending an elderly man, was it? It was about who he is to you." Jack's weathered face softened almost imperceptibly. "Captain Thompson saved more lives than anyone will ever know, including mine. Multiple times. You served under him? In operations that officially never happened, Jack confirmed. When you owe your life to someone, that debt doesn't expire when the uniform comes off. Emma nodded, making notes. And the other angels? How many are veterans? About 60% of our chapter, Jack replied. Higher than the national average for the club. That challenges the public perception of the Hells Angels as merely an outlaw motorcycle club. Jack's laugh was more of a grunt. We've been many things over the years, not all of them worth defending. But the bond between those who served, that's sacred, always has been. As their conversation continued, Emma began to understand the complex ecosystem that existed in Sturgis, how the Hells Angels, despite their complicated history with the law, functioned as unofficial guardians for the veteran community, how respect was currency, and how the generations were bound by unwritten codes that outsiders like Tyler Brooks couldn't begin to comprehend. Last question, Emma said as their coffee cups emptied. Those young men yesterday, do you think they can learn from this? Actually change? Jack considered the question seriously. Most wouldn't. Too invested in their own image. But that one, the leader, there was something in his eyes at the end. Recognition, maybe. Recognition of what? That he'd crossed a line he didn't even know existed. Jack stood, indicating the interview was over. Whether he steps back or doubles down, that's the real test of character. As Emma thanked him and gathered her notes, neither of them noticed the rental SUV parked across the street, or Tyler Brooks sitting alone inside it, gathering the courage for the most difficult apology of his life. One without cameras, without an audience, without the safety net of editing or narrative control. Monday morning arrived with an unseasonable chill in the air. Tyler Brooks sat in his rental SUV outside the Sturgis Veterans Affairs office, 15 minutes early for his first volunteer shift. The weekend had been a whirlwind of professional catastrophe. His main channel temporarily suspended, sponsors fleeing, and his management team frantically trying to contain the damage. But something else had happened, too. Something more significant than the collapsing infrastructure of his online persona. After watching Jack Harlow leave the diner on Saturday, Tyler had finally worked up the courage to approach Bill Thompson's modest home on the outskirts of town. The conversation that followed had lasted nearly 3 hours and contained not a single word about viral videos, content strategies, or damage control. Instead, Bill had shared stories about Tyler's father, not the sanitized hero narrative that Tyler had constructed over the years, but the complex reality of a man who had struggled with his duties, who had questioned and doubted, who had ultimately believed in service despite those doubts. Bill had never met Staff Sergeant James Brooks personally, but he recognized the type, men who served not because they had all the answers, but because they understood the questions were bigger than themselves. Your father wasn't a prop in someone else's story, Bill had told him, the words cutting deeper than any online criticism ever could. And neither are the veterans you encounter today. Now, as Tyler prepared to enter the VA office, those words echoed in his mind. For years, he had reduced people to props, to reactions, to engagement metrics. The realization was uncomfortable, but necessary. Inside, Mrs. Jennings greeted him with cautious approval. "You're early. Good start." Tyler nodded, unusually subdued. "Where should I begin?" "You'll be working with Frank Delgado today," Mrs. Jennings informed him, referencing the one-armed veteran Tyler had seen at the Memorial Park. "He's coordinating our digital archive project." Tyler swallowed hard. "Mrs. Jennings, I should mention, Mr. Delgado saw what happened at the park. He might not want to work with me." He requested you specifically, Mrs. Jennings replied, surprising Tyler. Said something about second chances being earned, not given. Frank was waiting in a small conference room, surrounded by boxes of photographs, letters, and memorabilia. He acknowledged Tyler with a nod, but offered no warm welcome. These need to be digitized, Frank explained, gesturing to the materials with his remaining arm. Properly labeled, properly stored, each item has a story. Each story matters. I understand, Tyler replied, though he wasn't sure he did. Not yet. No, you don't, Frank said bluntly, but maybe you will. Start with these letters. Scan them according to the protocol in this manual. No shortcuts. For the next several hours, Tyler worked in silence, carefully handling letters written from battlefields across decades of American conflicts. The faded handwriting, the yellowed paper, the intimate details of lives interrupted by war. It was a different kind of content than he had ever encountered, unfiltered by algorithms or engagement strategies. By lunchtime, his back ached from hunching over the scanner, his eyes strained from deciphering handwriting. But something else had happened, too. He had become immersed in the stories. A letter from a young soldier in Vietnam to his pregnant wife, promising to be home for the birth. A postcard from Korea with coded reassurances that the writer was safe, though the historical record would later reveal his unit had been surrounded at the time. "Why are you doing this?" Frank asked suddenly, breaking the hours of silence. Tyler looked up, startled, scanning the letters. "No, this whole volunteer thing. Is it just damage control for your online reputation?" The question would have offended Tyler just days ago. Now it seemed fair, necessary even. "It started that way," he admitted. "But these letters, they're real in a way that nothing in my world has been for a long time." Frank studied him with skeptical eyes. "You've built a career turning real people into entertainment. That doesn't change overnight." "I know," Tyler acknowledged, "but it has to start somewhere." Frank seemed to accept this answer, or at least not reject it outright. "Take a lunch break. Be back in 30 minutes. Outside the VA office, Tyler found Jason waiting in their rental SUV. His friend's expression was a mixture of concern and confusion. "Dude, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you all morning. Cody's been on damage control with the sponsors, and I've been fielding calls from your manager. They've got a strategy for getting your channel reinstated, but they need you to film an apology video ASAP." Tyler hesitated, the familiar rhythms of his online existence suddenly feeling distant. "I can't right now. I'm in the middle of something." Jason's confusion deepened. "In the middle of what? Scanning old papers? Tyler, your career is imploding, and you're volunteering at the VA. What's happening to you?" It was a fair question, one Tyler wasn't sure he could answer yet. "I just need some time to figure things out." "Time is exactly what we don't have," Jason insisted. "The algorithm doesn't forgive absence. 3 days offline, and you're already losing followers by the thousands." Just a week ago, that news would have sent Tyler into a panic. Now, it barely registered compared to the weight of the letter he'd just scanned. A final message from a dying soldier to parents who would never see him again. "Let them unfollow," Tyler said quietly. "Maybe I need a different audience anyway." Jason stared at him in disbelief. "Who are you, and what have you done with Tyler Brooks?" The question lingered in the air between them, heavier than either expected. Who was Tyler Brooks beyond the carefully constructed online persona? Beyond the provocations and performances? It was a question he hadn't asked himself in years. I need to get back to work. Tyler said finally, I'll call you later. As Tyler returned to the VA office, Jason remained in the SUV, watching his friend walk away with the unsettling feeling that something fundamental had changed, and that the Tyler Brooks who had arrived in Sturgis might not be the same one who left. Inside, Tyler resumed his work with the letters, but his conversation with Jason had unsettled him. The professional infrastructure he had built over years was collapsing, and part of him, the part that had driven his ambition for so long, screamed that he needed to salvage what he could. "Something on your mind?" Frank asked, noticing Tyler's distraction. Tyler hesitated, then decided on honesty. "My career is falling apart. My team wants me to film an apology video, get back online, stop the bleeding." Frank considered this. "And you're here instead. Why?" "Because I'm starting to wonder if what I built is worth saving," Tyler admitted. Frank nodded slowly. "Hard question, harder answer." They worked in silence for another hour before Frank spoke again. "You know, my unit got ambushed in Fallujah. Lost my arm. Lost 3 friends. For a long time after, I measured everything against that moment. What mattered, what didn't." Tyler listened, sensing the rare offer of personal insight. "Your career imploding isn't the end of the world," Frank continued. "It's just the end of a chapter. The question is what story you write next." The words stayed with Tyler through the afternoon and into the evening as he completed his shift and returned to the rental cabin. Jason and Cody were waiting with anxious expressions and open laptops. Finally, Cody exclaimed, "We've drafted an apology script. If we film tonight, we can have it edited and uploaded by morning." Tyler took the laptop and read the carefully crafted statement, a masterpiece of non-apology, deflection, and brand rehabilitation. It mentioned misunderstandings and learning opportunities, but admitted no real wrongdoing. It was exactly the kind of content that had built his career. "No," Tyler said, closing the laptop. "If I apologize again, it needs to be real." "Real doesn't get your sponsors back," Jason argued. "Real doesn't save your metrics." "Maybe I don't want them back," Tyler replied, surprising himself as much as his friends. "Not on those terms." Cody threw up his hands in frustration. "So what's the plan? Throw away 5 years of building this brand? For what? Because some old bikers scared you straight?" The dismissive characterization of the Hells Angels, of Jack Harlow and his connection to Bill Thompson, bothered Tyler in a way it wouldn't have just days ago. "It's not about being scared," Tyler said. "It's about being wrong. There's a difference." That night, after his friends had gone to sleep, Tyler sat alone on the cabin's porch, watching the distant glow of Sturgis and contemplating the rapid unraveling of his carefully constructed life. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Proud of you for volunteering. It's a start." A start toward what? Tyler wasn't certain, but for the first time in years, the uncertainty didn't terrify him. The next morning, Tyler returned to the VA office to find not Frank Delgado waiting for him, but Bill Thompson himself, seated in the conference room with a stack of photographs and a digital recorder. "Mr. Thompson," Tyler acknowledged, surprise evident in his voice. "I wasn't expecting you." "Frank had a medical appointment," Bill explained. "Asked if I'd fill in. We're recording oral histories today." Tyler nodded, taking the seat across from Bill. "What do you need me to do?" "Listen." Bill replied simply. Really listen, not for content, for understanding. For the next several hours, Tyler operated the recording equipment while Bill interviewed fellow veterans, men and women spanning conflicts from Vietnam to Afghanistan. Each story was unique, yet connected by threads of service, sacrifice, and the complex realities of returning to civilian life. Tyler found himself captivated not just by the stories themselves, but by Bill's approach to gathering them. The respect he showed for silences, the careful way he acknowledged trauma without exploiting it, the genuine interest in details that would never make a viral highlight reel. During a break, Tyler gathered his courage to ask the question that had been building since their conversation at Bill's home. "Mr. Thompson, why are you giving me this chance, after what I did?" Bill considered the question carefully. Because redemption isn't granted by others. It's built through actions, one day at a time. "But you could have pressed charges," Tyler persisted. "You could have made an example of me." "To what end?" Bill asked. "More division? More anger? The world has enough of both." Before Tyler could respond, the door opened, and Emma Wilson entered, carrying her professional camera. She stopped short when she saw Tyler. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, looking between the two men. "Not at all," Bill assured her. "Mr. Brooks is helping with the oral history project today." Emma's journalistic curiosity was evident. "That's unexpected." Tyler met her gaze directly. "A lot has changed since the memorial park." "So I've heard," Emma replied. "Your apology to Mr. Thompson was mentioned in my follow-up interviews. Several people called it unexpectedly genuine." Tyler hadn't realized his private apology had become public knowledge, though in a small town like Sturgis, perhaps nothing remained truly private. "I meant every word," he said simply. Emma studied him with professional assessment. "I'd like to include your perspective in my piece. The transformation angle adds depth to the narrative." Just days ago, Tyler would have jumped at the media opportunity, calculating angles and messaging. Now he hesitated. "What's your angle?" Emma seemed to appreciate the direct question. Beyond the viral moment, the connections between veterans, the Hells Angels, and the community of Sturgis, how respect functions as social currency, and now, perhaps how genuine remorse can lead to unexpected growth. The framing surprised Tyler. Not exploitation, but context. Not sensation, but substance. "I'd be willing to talk," he decided, "but not about my online presence or my career, just about what I'm learning here." Emma nodded. "That's exactly what interests me." As Emma set up her recording equipment, Bill excused himself, leaving Tyler to face the journalist alone. Without his friends, without his carefully crafted image, Tyler felt strangely vulnerable, yet authentic in a way he hadn't in years. "So," Emma began, "what brought you to volunteer at the VA? Damage control, or something more?" "It started as damage control," Tyler admitted. "But these stories, they're changing how I see things." "What things, specifically?" Tyler considered the question carefully. Value. What has it, and what doesn't? "I've spent years chasing metrics that ultimately mean nothing. Engagement over substance. Reaction over connection." Emma made notes. "And the veterans you're working with, how have they responded to your presence, given what happened at the memorial park?" "With more grace than I deserved," Tyler acknowledged. "They're teaching me about a different kind of strength. Not the kind that dominates algorithms, but the kind that endures after the cameras stop rolling. The interview continued for nearly an hour, Tyler answering questions with a candor that surprised even himself. No performance, no calculation, just reflection on the rapid recalibration of his values. As Emma packed up her equipment, she offered one final observation. You know, in journalism, we talk about burying the lady, hiding the most important part of the story. I think maybe you've been burying your own lady for years. What do you mean? Tyler asked. The son of a fallen soldier becomes a social media provocateur, building his brand on the very opposite of the values his father embodied, until a confrontation with another veteran forces him to reconcile those contradictions. Emma shrugged. That's a story worth telling, the real one, not the manufactured version. After Emma left, Tyler sat alone in the conference room, her words echoing in his mind. The contradiction she had identified wasn't new. He had lived with it for years, but seeing it articulated so clearly was jarring. His phone buzzed with a notification. His management team had issued a statement without his approval, promising his return to content creation after a period of reflection. The carefully crafted press release mentioned his father's military service, positioning Tyler's recent actions as part of a deeply personal journey of reconnection. The exploitation of his father's memory, of his own private reckoning, for brand rehabilitation filled Tyler with a sudden clarifying anger. Without hesitation, he composed a text to his manager. I did not authorize that statement. Take it down immediately. The response came quickly. Don't throw away your career over one mistake. We can rebuild your brand. Tyler's reply was concise. Not interested in rebuilding. Consider this my notice. Contract terminated. As he set his phone aside, Tyler felt a strange mixture of terror and relief. His carefully constructed professional identity was dissolving, but beneath it, something else was emerging, something more authentic, if less marketable. That evening, as Tyler drove back to the rental cabin, he made an impulsive decision and redirected to the outskirts of town, where the Hells Angels clubhouse stood. He parked across the street, watching as members came and went, their motorcycles gleaming in the setting sun. He wasn't sure what he was doing there, seeking closure, understanding, or something else entirely. As he sat contemplating his next move, a familiar figure emerged from the clubhouse. Jack Harlow, instantly recognizable even at a distance. To Tyler's surprise, the Hells Angels president looked directly at his vehicle, then crossed the street with purposeful strides. Tyler rolled down his window, his heart racing with uncertainty. Mr. Harlow, he acknowledged. Brooks. Jack's expression was unreadable. Bit far from your usual haunts, aren't you? I wanted to apologize to you as well, Tyler said, the words coming easier now with practice. For the disrespect, not just to Mr. Thompson, but to all of you. Jack studied him with assessment, born of decades of judging character. Bill says you're volunteering at the VA. Yes, sir. Digitizing letters, recording oral histories. Good start, Jack allowed. But a start is all it is. Tyler nodded. I know. I'm trying to figure out what comes next. Jack's weathered face softened almost imperceptibly. That's the hardest part, moving forward after you've recognized a mistake. Some never manage it. How did you? Tyler asked, the question emerging before he could consider its presumption. To his surprise, Jack didn't take offense. One day at a time, finding purpose beyond myself. The club gave me that. just like it gives purpose to a lot of veterans who come home and find civilian life insufficient. The insight into the Hells Angels was unexpected, not the criminal enterprise of popular imagination, but a brotherhood offering structure, purpose, and belonging to men who had known those things in service and lost them in return to civilian life. "Thank you," Tyler said simply. "For the perspective." Jack nodded once, then turned to leave before pausing. "Your father was military, I hear." "Yes. Army. Killed in Iraq." "He'd be proud," Jack said, "of today. Maybe not what came before, but today's a new start." As Jack walked away, Tyler sat in silence, the simple acknowledgement more meaningful than the millions of likes, shares, and comments that had defined his worth for years. The following Sunday, Emma Wilson's comprehensive feature was published, not just in her regional publication, but picked up by national outlets fascinated by the intersection of social media culture, veteran communities, and the evolving role of groups like the Hells Angels in small-town America. The piece, titled "Respect is Not Content: How a Viral Confrontation Revealed America's Changing Values," painted a nuanced portrait of Sturgis and its interconnected communities. Bill Thompson featured prominently, his quiet dignity and service record providing the moral center. The Hells Angels were presented not as one-dimensional outlaws, but as complex guardians of traditional values in a rapidly changing cultural landscape. And Tyler Brooks, described as a content creator undergoing a very public recalibration of priorities, emerged as an unlikely bridge between generations, his transformation representing the possibility of reconciliation between digital performance culture and authentic human connection. The article concluded with a quote from Tyler that had been almost an afterthought in their interview. "Maybe the algorithm that matters isn't the one that drives engagement, but the one that guides us back to our humanity when we lose sight of it." The piece went viral in its own right, generating discussions across platforms about the ethics of content creation, the treatment of veterans, and the meaning of respect in digital spaces. Tyler's former fans were divided, some dismissing him as going soft, others expressing support for his evolution. Brands that had dropped him began cautiously reaching out again, sensing a potential redemption narrative to associate with. But Tyler wasn't responding to those inquiries. Instead, he was sitting in Bill Thompson's modest living room, where a small gathering had assembled. Bill himself, Jack Harlow, Frank Delgado, and several other veterans and Hells Angels members. They were watching a rough cut of a documentary that Tyler had begun compiling from the oral histories recorded at the VA. "It needs work," Tyler acknowledged as the footage ended. "The audio quality is inconsistent, and the transitions are rough. But the substance is there," Bill said approvingly. "The truth of the experiences." "That's what matters," Jack agreed. "Not how slick it looks, but how honest it feels." Tyler nodded, accepting both the criticism and the praise. The project wasn't designed for viral spread or engagement metrics. It was simply an attempt to preserve stories that deserved telling, with respect for their complexity and without exploitation of their emotional impact. "What will you do with it when it's finished?" Frank asked. "Educational distribution, maybe," Tyler replied. "Schools, libraries, veterans organizations, whatever it might help people understand." "And your online channels?" Jack asked, the question direct but not judgmental. Tyler had been considering this question for days. His management team had been calling constantly, alternative content strategies already prepared. The infrastructure of his former life remained, waiting for his return. "I'm not going back to what I was doing before," he said finally. "But maybe there's a way to use those platforms differently, to amplify voices that deserve hearing instead of just chasing controversy." The men in the room nodded with approval, though Tyler knew the real test would come in the execution, in the daily choices about what to prioritize, what to value. As the gathering dispersed, Bill pulled Tyler aside. "I have something for you." He handed Tyler a small box, weathered with age. Inside was a military challenge coin. Not a high honor like a medal, but a symbol of membership, of belonging to something larger than oneself. "This was given to me by my commanding officer when I completed my first mission," Bill explained. "I've carried it for 50 years as a reminder of what service really means." Tyler looked at the coin with reverence. "Mr. Thompson, I can't accept this." "You're not keeping it," Bill clarified with a small smile. "You're carrying it for a while, until you've earned one of your own. A reminder of the legacy you're part of, whether you knew it or not." Tyler closed his hand around the coin, feeling its weight. Physical and symbolic. "Thank you. I'll carry it with honor." "See that you do," Bill replied. "Your father would expect nothing less." As Tyler drove back to Minneapolis the following day, leaving Sturgis and the rental cabin behind, the challenge coin rested in his pocket, a tangible reminder of promises made and values reclaimed. His career as he had built it was effectively over, but something new was taking shape. Something with foundations in authenticity rather than performance, in service rather than self-promotion. The algorithm that had once governed his every decision, optimizing for engagement, controversy, and viral potential, had been replaced by an older, deeper code, one that valued respect over reaction, substance over sensation, and the quiet dignity of lives lived in service to others. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma Wilson. "Stories getting national pickup. Offers for follow-up interviews coming in. Interested?" Tyler considered the opportunity. Months ago, he would have jumped at the chance for exposure. Now he typed a different response. "Only if it serves the larger story. This isn't about me anymore." As he crossed the state line, leaving South Dakota behind, Tyler realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about how to document the moment, how to package it for consumption, how to extract value from experience. He was simply living it, carrying the weight of lessons learned and promises made. The old veteran's words echoed in his mind. "Respect isn't content, boy, and some lessons cost more than views." It had been an expensive lesson indeed, professionally, personally, philosophically, but as the challenge coin pressed against his leg, a constant reminder of legacy and responsibility, Tyler Brooks understood that some costs were worth paying, and some transformations couldn't be measured in metrics, only in the quiet recognition of a life redirected toward what truly mattered, and that, unlike the fleeting fame of viral moments, was a currency that would never depreciate, an algorithm that would never change, a value that would endure long after the last camera stopped rolling. If this story of redemption and respect moved you, we've prepared a special playlist with equally compelling narratives about transformation and second chances. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed Respect is Not Content, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring unique stories that explore life's complexity and the power of human connection. Don't miss our upcoming content about the bridges between generations and the values that truly matter. We're waiting for your comments below.